Hello and welcome to another episode of the Automotive Leaders Winning Culture webcast. As we are cudgeled into a government-mandated era of electric vehicles based on the notion that these are environmentally friendly, our industry is experiencing quite a change. Some say it's doomed based on the false notion of a favorable environmental impact, but others say it's the ushering in of a new green technology that will save the planet. Maybe it will, maybe it won't. Automakers and dealerships are more concerned about making money and not being locked out of the profit party. But the question is there enough demand out there to make it worth the billions the industry has invested in the technology? Don't ask me, ask Akshay Singh, a partner in PwC's U.S. automotive advisory practice. He has 20 years of consulting in the automotive industry, helping automotive OEMs, tier 1 and tier 2 suppliers, and private equity clients on issues related to portfolio rationalization, large-scale cost transformations, M&A, and connected autonomous, shared, and electric technologies. To say the least, he's an expert in the field, and we want to thank you, Akshay Singh, for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for inviting, Kelly. Looking forward to the discussions.
I need oxygen after that introduction, by the way, but I'm not done yet. Here we go. First question, was the move to electric a result of a market demand, government mandate, or a mix of political and economic factors using the green angle as leverage to initiate launch?
I think, Kelly, you can, it's all of the above. Government mandates and government incentives and regulations are actually pushing electric vehicle penetration. Obviously, government mandates and regulations are different across regions. That's why you see different level of penetration across regions. But when we actually think of electric vehicle penetration, so we look at what are really the drivers of electric vehicle penetration, right? So in our opinion, we look at both the supply side drivers and the demand side drivers. And if you look at some of the demand side drivers it's the number one in our opinion is the vehicle economics. And what we mean by vehicle economics is the total cost of ownership parity between ICE vehicles and electric vehicles, okay? Regulations certainly play a role, and regulations to a certain extent actually change the economics, right? So they impact the economics and drive, in certain instances, for example, if there are vehicle incentives that change the cost of parity equation between ICE and electric vehicles. So that, in our opinion, number one driver. Then there are other drivers, for example, consumer preferences, then availability of charging infrastructure, the battery technology, how far a vehicle can go, what is the range of a vehicle. Then also, are there enough models that are available in the market for consumers to choose from, right? A lot of the models, if you see today, are actually on the luxury side, but are there enough models in the mass market segment to drive that penetration? Are there enough models for the consumers to choose from? That's a supply side driver, right? So all of these actually play a role, and we believe that, as I said, like vehicle economics to a certain extent, in our belief, it is the number one driver, but all of these other drivers play a significant role.
Yeah. Well, there's clearly supply chain risks and demand for that matter in pumping up demand for this technology. Can you share your thoughts on the issue? And will the EV market rely heavily on fleet sales since there's so little profit in a cheap EV?
No, I think you see that where the demand is right now. The demand is actually in the luxury segment. One is because most of the vehicles that are offered are in luxury segment. One of the reasons also being that the cost equation works better in the luxury segment, and also the customers or consumers are not as price sensitive, right? So they may be willing to pay 5-10% extra more, right? So it's not as price sensitive as mass market segment. But cost of an EV certainly is going to plays a role, and fleet. As you think about the fleet, the fleets are even more, I would say, price sensitive or cost sensitive. They look at the total cost of ownership very, fairly carefully, right? Because in the end, it's all about the bottom line for the fleets, right? So the fleets, that's why we see that, a lot of the fleets, when we talk about the commercial vehicle side, a lot of the electrification, if you look at the commercial vehicle segments, like we have a light duty, we have medium duty, and the heavy duty. Most of the electrification is actually happening in the last mile delivery segment. And one of the reasons is that economics actually work for fleet vehicles in the last mile delivery segment, right? When you look at how many miles the vehicles are driven, less than 100 miles or between 100 and 150 miles a day, EVs are, cheaper to operate than ICE vehicles. The economics actually work, right? So that's why you see higher penetration in the light duty segment, last mile delivery segment, versus say medium duty and heavy duty segments. But those segments, there are other challenges as well in terms of battery capacity, the range of the vehicles, availability of infrastructure, especially for long haul trucks, right? So that's why I think fleet is a good target when it comes to commercial vehicles, especially in the last mile delivery segment.
Yeah, let's talk about that. I've got two questions to kind of cover exactly what you brought up there. But first, a little quick update on shares of some of these OEMs. VW shares are down 33% over 5 years and down 6.24% this year. Although sales are slightly up thanks to their ID4 and the federal tax credit of $7,500 certainly helps. Ford shares are down, although EV sales are up. Chevy shares are down, Toyota's creeping up, Mercedes up, and EV sales are now in greater supply, obviously, maybe a little bit more than, or as expected, I should say. But other than Tesla, which OEMs are poised to profit the most from the EV market, and which are just going to continue to tread water, which it appears is the case currently?
So I cannot, necessarily name one OEM, and because we are not allowed to actually give opinion about OEMs, but I'll tell you that, right? First of all, it is going to be at least take some time for OEMs to generate profit on electric vehicles. Electric vehicles still cost more than the ICE vehicles, right? So the battery costs are coming down. But actually battery cost and expected to come down, but last year the battery cost actually went up, right? So we know because of the inflation, so actually the cost went up, right? So, but the battery costs are expected to come down. So it's going to take a while. And we have seen, like, based on some of the recent results from some of the automotive OEMs, that actually they are still not at scale. And that's why actually they are losing money when it comes to electric vehicles. So it's going to take, in the medium term, some time before they actually generate profit, right?
Yeah.
But they will eventually, get the cost down. The battery costs are coming down. Eventually, they are going to actually achieve scale, and then that would actually generate profit. But I think it's going to take some time, right? There'll be, in the short term, there will be some pains, right? Mm-hmm. Because especially in North America, with the economics, in the next at least 4 or 5 years, we expect modest EV penetration, right? So if you look at like last year, North America was only 6%. EVs were actually only 6% of the total market. Europe was 15%, and China was over 20%, right? Around 22% or so, right? So North America is still behind. So OEMs that rely a lot more on North America and pumping out EV models, at least in the short term, you're going to see some pains, but eventually the market is going to take off. The demand is going to increase. We see the increase in demand, but the question is when we would see, a substantial increase in demand, right? That's the question. Mm-hmm. And that's why I believe that the market is going to be extremely competitive in the next 4 or 5 years, because if you look at the number of models that OEMs are planning to introduce in the next 5 years, it's staggering, right? Globally, there are more than 1,000 nameplates, EV nameplates that OEMs are planning to introduce. In North America, it's more, close to over 170 nameplates in the next 8 years or so. And if you look at the sub-segment level, right, the competition is even more intense. For example, large SUV segment or medium to large SUV segment is one of the biggest segment. And if you look at the number of models or nameplate that OEMs are planning to introduce, it's disproportionate to what that segment looks like, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So I think it's going to be a more intense competition in the next short term to medium term. And I can tell you that there will be more losers than winners, at least in the short term.
Yeah.
Right. So there are a lot of OEMs competing for that market, and there are new entrants as well, right? So there are a lot of new entrants who are actually also competing for that market, right? So eventually you would see some consolidation, right? I mean, not everything is everyone is going to make profits. And then if you just look at like some of what every OEM is planning to, at least what their sales targets are for the EVs, right? And if you add all of that up, you would probably see 60-70% penetration in the next 6-7 years, right? That's not an actual number. I'm just
No, you're right though.
my head, right? But every OEM has very ambitious targets, right? And not every OEM is going to achieve the target, right? So I think at least in the short term, you're going to see some losers than winners, right? So, and that's why we actually tell our clients, you have to be very, very thoughtful about where you deploy the investment and how you deploy the investment, right? How do you actually manage the risk, the capital investments you are making, both on the OEM side and especially for the tier 1 and tier 2 suppliers, right? So it's very, very important for them, right, that to be more thoughtful about the investments they are making and how they are rolling out the investments.
Well, to that point, demand is driven by perception, and we'll talk about performance of these vehicles, because in heavy weather seems to be an issue, as our charging hassles, affordability, software glitches, and the like. And there's a growing number of people who state they'll never buy an EV, or quite frankly, can't even afford to do it because of the ever expanding subprime market here in the United States. The economy is not so great. Even with the federal tax credit of $7,500, how will this sentiment affect OEMs, all chasing well less than 60% of the market, 41% of whom currently say they'll never buy an EV? That's per gallon.
I think the technology. So one thing about the EV product, like if you look at the pure driving experience, like EV is actually better than ICE, right? Once you drive an EV, right?
Agreed.
The experience is better than, so it's a better product.
It is.
So some of the things you actually just mentioned are definitely a concern, right? So the performance of an EV in cold weather, right? How much of the range is impacted, right? The charging time is actually big concern of a consumer, right? Consumers, a lot of, I don't recall, I recently read a survey. I don't recall, how many responded that charging time is a big concern, but it was actually top two or top three concern of a consumer. Number one, I think it was the price of the vehicle, then it was the range, and also the charging time, right? So OEMs are working on these things, right? I mean, that's why I said like it's going to take some time, but they are actually working on these issues, and the technology is only going to improve, and those concerns will be addressed. But there are some concerns, right? Range is a concern. Availability of charging infrastructure is a concern. One big issue is that how fast the charging infrastructure can be rolled out. Obviously, government is actually pumping a lot of money, and rightfully so, because we did some work around charging economics, and charging economics don't look pretty. It's a very, very, if you're deploying DC fast chargers, it's very capital intensive, and economics don't look that good. So I think government absolutely has a role to play there, and there's between $5 and $7.5 billion in charging infrastructure deployment that's available, right, through NEVI funding and IRA Act. But the question is how fast this charging infrastructure can be deployed, because we are also hearing that certain sites it can take up to 1 to 2 years to get a site ready
Mm.
to install the charging install DC fast chargers, right? So that's definitely a concern, right? How fast the infrastructure can be rolled out, because when you look at the infrastructure itself, and economics are not very pretty. So and also it's taking some time to actually get the sites ready. So that definitely is going to have an impact on EV penetration.
Yeah. And the other thing would be is what I mentioned was just, the expansion of the subprime market. It's, that's going to start reducing that desire to have penetrated into 60% of the market. And this, it's partially due to lenders, for those who don't know, should know if you're listening to this, lenders raise their threshold for what they consider to be a lower risk contract and prudent risk amelioration practice. Now, what it does is it prevents solid citizens who before inflation and interest rates took off were considered loanable.
Yeah.
Is there an out-of-the-box financing system out there that you've seen that addresses these individuals on the bubble, without loan sharking them into an EV repo?
I have not seen that. So that doesn't mean it does not exist. So I'm not aware of it, but I can tell you, if you look at the market, just the transaction prices. The transaction prices are actually all-time high, right? They have come down a little bit in the last couple of months, but they are still, 20-30% higher from the pre-COVID levels, right? So because of the there were obviously supply constraints, the dealer inventory the inventory at the dealer lots was pretty low. I think we have started to see that inventory is coming up, but the transaction prices are still high, right? So, and even then, the demand is, I wouldn't say that it hasn't declined. It hasn't declined by that much, right? So
Oddly enough.
the last month's SAR was around 15 million vehicles or so, right? So
yeah.
So yeah, we do expect vehicle prices to come down as the supply situation increases, the dealer inventory increases, and we have started to see that, right? So
at the outset of this year, 2023, which thankfully has been an interesting year for I think a lot of people. Granted, inflation's out of control. We've already touched on that. But you presented a three-pronged model called Repair, Rethink, and Re-Energize. Explain that model and which phase we're now in halfway through 2023.
I think we are in, so as most of our clients, we actually, if you look at the paper we talked about, right? Okay, one is that you actually have to preserve cash, and that's our clients are in cash preserving mode because clients are expecting a downturn, and that's why you see a lot of the OEMs and suppliers are actually taking aggressive actions to take cost out, which is much needed. So there are a couple of reasons for that, right? So one was that we actually said 3 or 4 years that, even 3 or 4 years ago, that there'll be a lot of pressure on OEMs and suppliers to actually take the cost out, and they will have to take very aggressive actions to take the cost out. One of the reasons being that, in order to fund the investment in the new technology, especially electrification, given the amount of investment that is being made by OEMs and tier one supplier, that has to come from somewhere, and that can only come from the core business, right? So you really need to optimize the core business to free up cash so that you can invest in the new technologies. And new technologies are, especially electrification, is not going to generate returns in the near term, at least, right? So most of pretty much everyone is in, cash preserve mode, or actually, extensive cost cutting mode to actually take the cost out so that they can invest in new technology, especially, adjusting their portfolio or, rebalancing the portfolio if the portfolio is skewed toward ICE vehicles, or, just looking for opportunities to grow the, EV portfolio. So right now they are mostly in, cost cutting mode.
They're in a cost cutting mode, understandably. My concern, and this is something that definitely needs to be added to the equation, are geopolitical issues with where we get the materials to create chips, because these semiconductors, you need twice as many in an EV that you do an ICE, right? It's an ICE vehicle. So we've got Russia, we've got China, where most of the ore is mined, and of course you've got South Korea and Taiwan, where these chips are mostly manufactured, because it's a very tricky process. It's highly technical. How do you see that? And granted, the next question is, where do you see the dealership model in 2030? But before that, we've got to get past these geopolitical issues, because that could have a major impact on this entire rollout.
No, I think it's not, and it's just not limited to semiconductors. It actually extends to a lot of the critical materials that go in the battery as well. And you see that, okay, government actually is emphasizing a lot, and or at least providing incentives to drive investment in these critical areas, especially semiconductors. We have already seen that the amount of investment that's being made in North America, because government has identified it as something which is critical, right? Critical component, right? So there's a lot of investment that is being made, and you can read about it, right? And you probably see that most of the chip makers are actually making investments in North America, and there's quite a bit of money in Inflation Reduction Act to drive that investment. And the other is, for electric vehicle which is very critical, is the materials, right? So if you look at, there are four major materials that go in electric vehicles: lithium, nickel, manganese, and cobalt, right? And if you look at where the supply is, so there are two things you have to look at. One is where the mineral is mined, and then the second is where it is being processed. Most of the processing is actually, even if, say, for example, lithium, more than 50% comes from Australia, but most of it is actually processed in China, right? So China still has, a lot of processing capacity, and that's a major risk, right? And that's why, if you look at, what government is trying to do, is trying to actually drive the investments in critical material processing and mining in North America, right? At least, if you look at like the $7,500 credit, right? There are only 10 models that actually qualify for that $7,500 credit, because there are requirements related to where the battery materials are coming from, right? So there is, there is a lot of emphasis on these critical components and material, and government is actually providing a lot of incentives, especially in IRA Act, right? There is quite a bit of incentives to actually drive investment in those critical materials and components.
Yeah. And I think that what you're referring to was a $50+ billion investment that the U.S. government approved. And I won't say an investment, but money that they've put towards the development of infrastructure. But that really doesn't even scratch the surface, and it does very little. And then they've got to be able to pass all sorts of environmental. There's just so much to do to be able to actually make some weight in that area. So we're still going to be importing quite a bit of it. Where do you see the dealership model in 2030? It's gypsy time. You got to be a gypsy here. Look into your crystal ball.
So here's the thing. Dealerships are here to stay. I think obviously there are new entrants or startups who are actually choosing to go direct to consumers, right? And only certain states allow that, right? So there are dealer franchisee laws, right? And a lot of states actually don't allow that, right? So the dealers are here to stay. The question is what role they are going to play, right? Dealers absolutely have, there's a need for the dealership network to provide service to the consumer, right? There's a need to actually provide service like test drive, those kinds of things actually to the consumer. So dealerships are here to stay. I think there is the dealer is going to play a role, but you would also see OEMs playing an extensive role, right? Because right now there is I wouldn't say a battle, but I would say that there's some tension between OEMs and dealers in terms of who really owns the consumer. Is the dealer owns the consumer, the OEMs owns the consumer. Right now, dealer owns the consumer, right? Because they are the ones who are actually working directly, with the consumer, and they are the face, right? So, but OEMs want to change that because OEMs now want to provide full lifestyle experience to the consumers. So OEMs will also play a role, and dealer will absolutely play a role. But you think one thing you're going to see that is we are probably will never go back to the inventory levels we saw pre-pandemic, right? Where you had 80, 90 days of dealer inventories sitting in the lot. I don't think we're going to see that. Because if you look at the cost of, there's a big, OEMs have, there is a disadvantage in terms of cost of serving consumers through dealers and serving consumers directly, right?
Mhm.
There is a cost. If you look at that, around more than half of that actually comes from the inventory at the dealer lots, right? So especially, that is going to go away. OEMs, in order for them to be competitive, they cannot afford to have 80, 90 days of inventory at the dealer lots, because that's very uncompetitive for them, right? But
Yeah.
dealers will definitely play a role, and I don't think they're going to go away. That's absolutely not going to happen.
Well, you mentioned basically what we call lot rot. You can't have inventory sitting on a lot. At least that's what you're referring to. Are we going to see a subscription or a rental model in far greater numbers in the EV market, or at least when it starts to insinuate itself?
I personally believe that subscription model is too expensive for the consumers. I haven't looked at it lately, but at least the analysis we did it was more expensive. And for it to take traction, right? So it needs to come down, right? But still, you would see that slight increase in leasing market, because some of the OEMs are also driving the leasing model, right? Because one is they want to own the batteries, right? They want to own the second consumer as well, right? Or second owner, right? So you would see slight probably increase in leasing, and some of the OEMs are actually driving that. But if I'm understanding your question correctly, when you talk about a subscription, you're talking about like if I have 1 month subscription and I can change my vehicle, right?
Yeah.
I think that's too expensive for that's at least based on our estimates, it is too expensive for the consumer. Some OEMs tried it for 1 year and actually had to shut it down for that very reason. Right? So,
yeah. Or even
and same thing, like if you think about like last 4 or 5 years, so there's a lot of chat about that we are going to see substantial decrease in vehicle ownership, because most of the consumers are going to use shared or ride sharing.
Yeah.
Right. And at that time, we actually had done the analysis and said that because most of these things are actually driven by economics, and we estimated that if you actually are using a used personal vehicle, you are probably paying like $1.50 a mile, versus if you use ride sharing services, you are when it is $2.50 a mile, right? So consumers is not going to pay additional $4,000-5,000 out of his or her pocket to actually use ride sharing. I don't think that's going to. And certain areas it worked, right? Certain areas, especially where if you take into account the parking cost and all of that, right? There it would work, but not necessarily for consumers who are driving 10,000 miles a year. It just will be very, very uneconomical. And that's why we did not see significant uptick or significant decrease in car ownership, right? So
yeah.
And that's because it is driven by economics, and you actually have to look at how the economics look like. And at least for the subscription, when we last looked at it, it was not as economical. So I haven't looked at it, recently, but it's hard for me to believe that the economics changed substantially from the last 3 years or so.
You look back in history and you take a look at the very first, what they call green solution. in transportation. And that first one was the creation of the internal combustion engine, because horses were pooping all over the streets, and there was a big horse poop problem in big cities, in small cities throughout the United States, and horses dropping dead, and their owners just taking their good old time to pull them off the road. So there was a big issue with that. And here we are 100 and something odd years later, talking about a green solution that might not even be anything close to a green solution. In fact, it's probably a lot dirtier than the current, than a hybrid would be, certainly far more, potentially more damaging to the environment, potentially more damaging to the environment than the internal combustion engine. That's the electric vehicle. But we do have another option that I get very excited about, and I want to hear your words on it before we get into our last question, and that's the hydrogen fuel cell. It's so obviously better for the planet than anything that we've had so far. Well, has that technology been blocked, when in reality it is the true green solution?
So one thing I just want to say is that I'm not sure that EVs are going to be dirtier than ICE vehicles. I don't think that's correct. When you look at wells to wheels, there is reduction in greenhouse gas emissions. So obviously, it's not zero emission. It's not zero, but it's still lower than ICE vehicles, right? So I just want to
over time, though, right? Because
over time, and even if you look at
okay, all right, okay, fair enough.
But when you look at the hydrogen, right? So hydrogen has some challenges. One is, there's still more investment needed in the technology for the technology to be perfected. We definitely see hydrogen is going to play a role in long haul trucks. And again, I mean, the passenger vehicles, we think that hydrogen is very expensive, is more expensive. Then not many options available to the consumer. The infrastructure is not available, right? So there's not. I think most of the investment that is going on right now, it's in the charging infrastructure, not necessarily in hydrogen fuel cell, hydrogen fueling infrastructure. So that's going to be problem within, and also I think it's more expensive to own a hydrogen vehicle than ICE or EV, right?
Yeah.
In the commercial trucks, if you look at the long haul, right? So that's where we think that hydrogen could be a better option than electric trucks, fully electric trucks. One is the range. For semi trucks, long haul trucks, to get to like 400, 500 mile range, like you need a very, very large battery, and truck is going to become heavier. Like you're looking at 750 kilowatt hour battery, and it will take away the load carrying capacity of the truck, right? Because batteries are just heavy. But there are still some technology issues with hydrogen fuel cell. One is how reliable they are, right? I mean, for example, the reliability requirements from a commercial vehicle trucks are like around 1 million miles, and hydrogen is somewhere around 700, 800,000, right? So some OEMs are saying that their technology meets 100 million mile requirement, but that remains to be seen, right? So there are still some challenges that industry has to overcome as relates to hydrogen. So I think it's going to, at least on the passenger vehicle side, we don't see this as a viable option. We definitely see it as a viable option in long haul trucks.
Yeah, interesting. I'm pulling for it. I frankly hope that that'll be our next advancement, maybe 15, 20 years from now, maybe earlier, who knows. Okay, here's something that you're very familiar with, and that's the M&A world. Going over the next few years for retail automotive, will manufacturers, will the manufacturers direct throw a wrench into the M&A game? Where do you see the M&A game going 10 years from now?
In what sense? Like what do you mean by M&A game?
Well, if you're right now, what we're seeing is, a lot of dealerships are
so as it relates to retail.
Yeah, Yeah,
Okay,
retail.
so I'm talking about. So you're talking about. I mean, you see that there's a lot of consolidation going on in the dealer retail space. I think we expect that consolidation to continue, especially for some of the dealers. You know, in order to serve an EV, right? Some of the OEMs are requiring, you know, $500,000 to $1.2 million or over $1 million in investment, and that's a significant investment for dealers to make. So I think investment requirements are there. They're, you know, it's so we expect the consolidation to continue. It has increased over the last couple of years, and we think that it will continue in the next few years. So.
Okay, I'm going to throw one more question out there because it brings to mind the thought that there's that transition to EV, right? So there's going to be an investment needed on the dealership level.
Yeah.
And what does that look like? Is that a $250,000? I mean, how
But
would
if you just think about this, right? So there are multiple
Yeah.
investments that dealers have to make,
Yeah.
right? So one is that you need investment in technicians now, right? So now you are actually looking at, you know, you need someone who actually can work with, you know, high voltage systems, right? So you're not working with 12 volts anymore, right? So you're working with, you know, high voltage systems, and that's very different, right, from ICE vehicles. So there's investment in training and investment in new, you know, hiring of technicians, right? So that's one, right? The second is that you are looking at the investment in charging infrastructure, right? So what kind of chargers do you need, right? Right now, if you go to the dealers, most of the dealers are making investment in chargers, level 2 chargers. Level chargers not that expensive, less than $10,000. I think they can install few, and it's not that substantial. But when you are looking at like a DC fast chargers, then it becomes very expensive, right?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
And they would need DC fast chargers, like some mix of DC and DC fast and level 2. And DC fast charger, you know, a 350 kilowatt charger can cost upward of $250,000, right? So it's a substantial investment, right? And okay, you don't need 350 kilowatt charger. Probably if you did 150 to 200 kilowatt charger, even that one is expensive, right? So it's a substantial investment, right? And some OEMs, based on what we have heard, some OEMs are requiring dealers to make anywhere between $500,000 to $1.2 million per store. But I'm not saying that that's a requirement from one of the OEMs. I'm not saying that that's a requirement that is going to be the investment that will be needed by every dealer. But you see, like, where the investment will be made, right? It's not going to be small.
Yeah, it's interesting. You just get my brain buzzing, you know, the more we get into it. I'm wondering if everybody had an EV, could the grid even hold up?
So again, I mean, if everyone has an EV today, then yes, grid won't hold up.
Yeah, right.
But I think it also, that's why, and I think my colleagues in our utility practice can actually speak a lot more intelligently than I can, right? But also it's going to depend on at what time of the day the, you know, vehicle will be charged, right? If everyone comes at 6 o'clock in the evening and plug in their vehicle to charge, because most of the charging, in our opinion, will be actually done at home.
Yeah.
It's going to be more economical, it's going to be more convenient, right? If everyone comes back at 6 o'clock between 5 and 7 and they plug their vehicle to charge, then obviously grid will get overwhelmed, right? So,
sure.
So that's why actually smart charging is going to play a role, right? So, but our utility colleagues are actually working on what the investment needed in grid capacity, and it is actually a local issue, right? So you cannot really look at the national level, right? You really need to look at state level and even the local level. And certain localities, certain municipalities, certain local areas actually don't have enough capacity. Even if they have enough capacity, the question is, like, do you actually have distribution capacity, to supply or not, right? So
yeah.
So the investment is needed, obviously, but there is a transition. And also it depends on what time of the day you are, consumer is going to, or the vehicle owner is going to charge the vehicle, right? So,
yeah. Well,
and that's a concern right now. that's a
Yeah,
concern,
I
right?
personally would like to see some kind of a solar solution. I don't know where we are with that. It seems to make sense, maybe, 10 years down the road, that it's
Solar solution has
evolved.
its own challenge. A solar solution has solar solution, it comes to like electric vehicle, right? They put solar panels, or like it's a
Yeah.
solar solution, like most of the, for example, in California, they are moving towards solar, right? So
Mhm.
I don't remember the number, but 30 to 40% by the next 3 or 4 years, will be supplied through solar, or maybe in the next 5 years. I don't remember the year, but then you probably would have excess capacity during the day versus at night,
Yeah,
right?
right.
Today, if you look at, you have excess capacity at night, is just because if you look at the peak demand is actually during the day, right? When everyone in the office, right? I mean, when everyone's working, like it's during the day, right? And then you have enough capacity to charge your vehicles at night, right?
Yeah, yeah,
When you but when the supply is solar, then most of your capacity is actually during the day, right? Available capacity is during
yeah,
the day, and demand is also during the day, but
yeah.
you
And
don't
if
have
it's
as
solar,
much capacity available during night, right? So,
and if it's solar and the panel's actually on your car, you just got
yeah, but
obviously
that's a different one, right? So we
different
have
world. Yeah,
solar cars
exactly.
now. It's going to be, again, that's
We're
going to
not
be,
there.
we're not there. That's going to be too expensive of
Yeah, I
operation.
know.
It's going to be a hobby, the hobby vehicle probably.
Yeah, yeah. Well, you never know. Someone might right now in Iowa, some farmhouse somewhere is putting together something that's unbelievable. And I mean, that's how many inventions are created, by somebody who's just completely
Mhm.
off the grid. No one knows who they are. And hey, check this out. Hey, Akshay, anything else that you'd like to share with us?
Um, no,
Update us.
I think we have touched on a lot of areas, and there are a lot of interesting questions. So I would say one thing I say, always when I talk to my clients, I say that probably the automotive industry is probably going through a transition it hasn't seen since World War II, probably. And there is massive investments that's going on in the industry, with probably smaller returns in the near term, right? So again, I mean, as I said, like it's very important for our clients to um, think through how to actually deploy the investment and be more thoughtful about how to make the investment, when to make the investment, and are there partnership models available for them to make the investment to really manage that financial risk, right? In the short and medium term, right? So
Sage advice. Akshay Singh, I want to thank you for joining us on the Automotive Leaders Winning Cultures Car Motivators webcast. That's another mouthful right there, but very enlightening. It was well worth the 8 months, folks. We've been trying to book and sync up with Akshay and his team for a long time, and it was well worth the wait. Thank you so much, and all the best luck moving forward.
thank you very much, Kelly.
A pleasure.
Nice talking to you.
Thanks,
Take care.
Akshay. Cheers.
Bye.
Bye-bye.